Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
Dear listeners, before we get started, drop a quick hi in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Also, if you have any suggestions for us to make the channel better, please let us know. Now let's start with the story. My name is Martin Sanders, 28 years old and a sergeant in the United States Army. After 8 long years of service, missing 7 Christmases with my family, I was finally coming home. I'd counted down the days, packed my bags, and even bought presents. Then my phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Don't bother coming home." My heart sank, but I only replied, "Fine." 7 days later, I woke up to 20 missed calls from my family and 1 from their lawyer. I grew up in Portland, Maine, in a beautiful colonial-style house with a perfect view of the harbor. From the outside, the Sanders looked like the ideal American family. My father, Raymond, built his construction company from the ground up, becoming one of the most respected businessmen in town. My mother, Diana, gave up her teaching career to help run the family business and raise us 3 kids. My older brother Trevor was groomed from birth to take over the company someday. My younger sister Jenna was the academic star, heading to medical school. And then there was me, the middle child who never quite fit the Sanders mold. "Martin, why can't you just follow the plan like your brother?" Dad would ask whenever I showed interest in anything outside the family business. "Sanders Construction has your name on it too." But I had different dreams. While Trevor shadowed Dad at construction sites and Jenna collected academic awards, I joined ROTC in high school. I fell in love with the structure, the purpose, the camaraderie. The day I announced my intention to enlist instead of attending the business school Dad had already paid a deposit for was the first time I saw him truly lose control. "No son of mine is going to waste his life taking orders and getting shot at," he roared, his face turning that dangerous shade of red that always signaled a Sanders family storm. "Raymond, please," my mother pleaded, always the peacekeeper. "I've made my decision, Dad," I said, standing my ground even as my hands trembled. "I ship out next month." "Then you're no longer welcome in this house," he said coldly. My mother gasped. Trevor looked away uncomfortably. Jenna started crying. "Raymond, you don't mean that," my grandmother Erica said. She was the only one who ever stood up to him. "This is Martin's choice to make." "It's a stupid choice," he spat, "and he'll regret it." I left for basic training with only my grandmother's blessing. The next 8 years were a blur of desert landscapes, military bases, and combat zones. Basic training nearly broke me physically, but mentally, it was the first time I felt like I belonged somewhere. Drill sergeants didn't care about my family name or expectations, only that I pushed my limits and had my team's back. That's where I met Cassandra Cass Brooks. We survived boot camp together, got assigned to the same unit, and eventually deployed to Afghanistan side by side. She became the sister I never really had in Jenna. "You know, Sanders," Cass said one night during our first deployment, as we sat watching the stars from our base, "most people join to escape something or find something. Which one are you?" "Both, I guess," I admitted. "Escaping expectations. Finding myself." My first tour was difficult: the heat, the danger, the homesickness. But I discovered I was good at my job, cool under pressure, respected by my peers. I earned commendations, then medals. During my second tour, our unit was ambushed while escorting a medical convoy. Without thinking, I led a counteroffensive that saved 12 lives, including 2 local children. The Army awarded me the Silver Star. I sent the newspaper clipping home. My mother called, crying with pride. Jenna sent a card. Trevor texted, "Congratulations." From my father's silence. Communication with my family remained sparse and formal over the years. My mother would call on holidays, always careful never to mention my father directly. Jenna occasionally shared updates about her psychology studies. She'd switched from medicine. Trevor sent impersonal Christmas cards, signed from the Sanders family. The only consistent connection was my grandmother, Erica. She wrote me actual letters on cream-colored stationery. "Your grandfather would be so proud of you," she wrote after my promotion to sergeant. "He served in Korea, you know, though your father never likes to mention it." The Sanders men were not all businessmen, no matter what Raymond believes. When my grandmother suffered a minor stroke last October, I decided it was time to come home, at least for Christmas. My commanding officer, Captain Marcus Walker, supported the decision. "Family is complicated, Sanders," he said when I requested the holiday leave. "But at some point, you have to face it." I reached out first to my mother, then to my siblings. Their responses seemed cautiously positive. "Of course we want you home for Christmas," my mother wrote. "It's been too long." "About time," was Trevor's reply. "Can't wait to see you." Jenna texted with actual exclamation points. I allowed myself to hope. After 8 years, maybe the wounds had healed. Maybe my father had softened. Maybe this Christmas would be the reconciliation I'd secretly been waiting for. I was wrong. 3 days before my scheduled departure from base, my phone buzzed. I was packing my duffel bag, carefully wrapping the gifts I'd bought for everyone: a handcrafted jewelry box for Mom, a vintage compass for Trevor, psychology books for Jenna, and a cashmere scarf for Grandma Erica. The notification showed Dad. My heart stuttered. This was the first direct communication from him in 8 years. With trembling fingers, I opened the message. "We've moved on with our lives. Your room is Trevor's home office now. Don't bother coming home for Christmas. It will only upset your mother." I read it 3 times. Each word a punch to the gut. The dismissal. The finality. The way he weaponized my mother's feelings when I knew he was only protecting his own. My first instinct was to call Mom. But I stopped myself. How many times had she chosen peace over standing up for me? My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I started typing lengthy responses, deleting each one. In the end, I just wrote, "Fine." That single word contained years of hurt, anger, and resignation. It was acceptance that some relationships couldn't be fixed, no matter how much you wanted them to be. Captain Walker found me sitting on my bunk, staring at nothing. "Sanders? Thought you'd be halfway to the airport by now." I handed him my phone without a word. He read the message, his expression darkening. "Your father's a fool," he said finally, handing the phone back. "Looks like I'll be here for Christmas after all," I said, trying to sound casual as I began unpacking the gifts. "Like hell you will." Cass appeared in the doorway. "My parents have a house in Vermont. They already invited you, remember? Now you're just out of excuses." "I don't want to intrude on your family Christmas," I said. "Shut up, Sanders." Cass grabbed my half-empty duffel and started refilling it. "My mom already got you a custom gaming keychain with your name on it." "I appreciate it," I said, hesitating. "But I think I need some time alone to process everything." Captain Walker nodded. "Your leave is approved either way, Sergeant. Use it how you need to." That night, I made a decision. I would still go to Maine, but not to my family's home. I found a small rental cabin near my hometown. A place to retreat, reflect, and maybe find some closure. I modified my travel plans and notified my commanding officer. The journey home was long and lonely. As the plane descended through clouds toward Portland, memories flooded back: childhood Christmases, the smell of my mother's cinnamon rolls, sledding with Trevor and Jenna on the hill behind our house. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what I had lost, or perhaps never really had. The rental cabin was nothing like the Sanders family home. Small, rustic, with mismatched furniture and a temperamental heating system. But it was clean, quiet, and mine for the next 2 weeks. After settling in, I drove to the local grocery store for supplies. As I debated between cereal brands, a familiar voice called my name. "Martin? Martin Sanders, is that you?" Rachel Thomas, my best friend from high school, stood there with a shopping basket. Her curly hair was shorter now, and she looked tired, but happy. "Rachel." I dropped my basket and hugged her, suddenly grateful for a friendly face. "Oh my God, when did you get back? Are you home for good? Why didn't you tell anyone you were coming?" The questions tumbled out of her. "Just got in today," I said. "I'm on leave for Christmas." I kept it deliberately vague. "Your parents must be thrilled. I ran into your mom at the pharmacy last week, and she didn't mention anything." I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. It was sort of last minute. Rachel's expression shifted slightly as she read between the lines. "You're not staying with them, are you? I rented a cabin up by Crystal Lake." She nodded slowly. "Want to grab coffee? Catch up properly." Over coffee, I gave Rachel the abbreviated version. That there was tension with my father. That I needed space. "I'm not surprised," she said finally. "Your dad's been different these past few years. More controlling, from what my parents say. They used to do business with Sanders Construction. Until your dad suddenly dropped their contract, no explanation." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I don't know the details. Just that there've been rumors. Changes in the business. People let go without notice." She hesitated. "He tells everyone you refuse to come home, by the way. Has for years." The revelation stung more than it should have. While I'd been defending my country, my father had been rewriting my story to anyone who would listen. "Well," I said, finishing my coffee. "I'm home now, whether he likes it or not." The next morning, a sharp knock on the cabin door startled me awake. I instinctively reached for a weapon that wasn't there before remembering where I was. 8 years in combat zones creates habits that don't disappear overnight. I peered through the peephole and saw my grandmother Erica standing there, leaning on her cane, but looking determined as ever. "Were you planning to tell me you were in town?" She demanded the moment I opened the door, but her stern expression quickly melted into a smile. "Oh, look at you. Still standing at attention like a proper soldier." I relaxed my posture and stepped forward to hug her, careful not to squeeze too hard. She felt smaller than I remembered, more fragile. "How did you find me?" I asked, ushering her inside and helping her with her coat. "Rachel's mother called me. This town has no secrets. Dear, you should know that by now." She settled into the armchair by the window, patting her knees as she looked around. Now tell me why you're hiding in this cabin instead of staying in your home. Dad made it clear I wasn't welcome, I said simply. She sighed deeply. That son of mine has always been too proud for his own good. But there's more to it this time. She leaned forward slightly, her voice lower. The business is in trouble, Martin. Serious trouble. What kind of trouble? I asked. Financial? Legal? I'm not sure of the details. Raymond doesn't confide in me anymore. But he's changed. More secretive. More controlling with Diana, and with the children. She reached for my hand. Trevor made some poor decisions with company investments. Jenna withdrew from her PhD program without telling anyone. Your mother barely leaves the house now. The picture she painted was disturbing, a family unraveling behind the perfectly polished facade. Why are you telling me this, Grandma? I asked. She squeezed my hand gently. Because you deserve to know what you're walking into. And because, despite everything, they're still your family. After Erica left promising to visit again, though without telling my parents, I sat in the quiet, trying to process everything she'd shared. My phone stayed silent. No calls. No texts from my mother or my siblings. Despite the certainty that Rachel's mother had spread the word of my return, I was still contemplating my next move when another knock came at the door. This time, it was a tall, broad-shouldered man with kind eyes and a tool belt. Mr. Sanders? I'm Ronan Cooper. The rental agency sent me to fix that leaky faucet you reported. He worked quickly and efficiently, moving around the small kitchen with ease. But I noticed him stealing glances at the military duffel by the door and at the dog tags I'd left on the coffee table. Army? He asked as he tightened the last pipe. 8 years, I said. Just on leave for the holidays. My brother served. Marines, he said, wiping his hands on a rag. You're Raymond Sanders' son, aren't you? I nodded, bracing for the usual reaction, the polite distance people kept once they connected me to my father's influence. But Ronan just frowned slightly. Must be tough. Coming back to all this. All what? I asked, wary. He looked uncomfortable. Just town gossip. Nothing important. Please. I'd rather know. He hesitated, then sighed. There have been rumors about Sanders' construction. Government contracts that seem to appear overnight. Competitors being underbid by impossible margins. Some of the local contractors who used to work with your dad have been blacklisted from major projects. He shrugged. Like I said, just talk. But it aligned too well with what Grandma had said to be dismissed so easily. Over the next few days, I reacquainted myself with my hometown. Main Street had new shops. The park where I used to play had been renovated. The high school had a new wing, named after a local businessman not my father, I noticed with interest. Everywhere I went, I felt eyes following me, whispers trailing behind. The prodigal Sanders' son back from war, but staying in a rental cabin instead of his family's mansion. On day 4 of my leave, I ran into Jenna at Coastal Coffee, the same little cafe where we used to cram for finals and argue over whose playlist got to stay on. She froze the moment she saw me. Her expression cycled fast: shock, guilt, and something else I couldn't quite place. Fear, maybe. Martin, she said finally, her voice barely audible. You're really here. In the flesh. I gestured to the empty chair across from her. Can I join you? She glanced nervously at the door before nodding. I can't stay long. Up close. Jenna looked worn down. Dark circles under her eyes. Her frame thinner than I remembered. The confident, razor-sharp academic I used to tease had been replaced by someone who flinched at the espresso machine's hiss. How are you, Jenna? I asked, trying to keep my voice gentle. Fine. Busy with research. The lie slid out so easily it made my stomach turn. How many other lies had our family gotten comfortable telling? Grandma said you left your program. Her eyes widened in alarm. Don't tell Dad you know that. Please. What's going on, Jenna? What's happening with the family? She started gathering her things, movements rushed, almost frantic. I shouldn't be talking to you. Dad would. Dad would what? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She froze mid-motion, then stood, slinging her bag over her shoulder. Dad's not well, Martin. You should stay away for your own good. Then she leaned down, her voice low. And for hours. Before I could ask what the hell that meant, she was gone. The bell above the door chimed sweetly behind her like nothing unusual had just happened. That night, Ronan stopped by with firewood, said it was left over from another job. I figured it was just an excuse to check in, but I didn't mind. The warmth and the company were both welcome. Learn anything interesting about your hometown? He asked as we sat drinking hot chocolate by the fire. I stared into the flames for a moment. Just that everyone seems afraid of my father, including my own sister. Ronan nodded slowly, his face blank in the flickering light. Raymond Sanders has always inspired fear more than respect. But lately, he let the thought hang. Lately what? It's like he's desperate. Making threats. Calling in favors. Word is he's in deep with some government contracts that aren't going well. Government contracts. The words triggered something a half-forgotten conversation with Captain Walker just before I left base. Sanders? Isn't your father in construction? There's been some talk about irregular bidding on military infrastructure projects back east. I'd brushed it off at the time. But now, Ronan, what exactly does Sanders Construction build these days? He raised his eyebrows, surprised I didn't already know. That's the thing, they've shifted almost entirely to government work. Military barracks, storage facilities, training centers. All stuff that requires security clearance. He gave me a curious look. Didn't you know? I didn't. And I was starting to realize that might be the whole point. On the 5th day of my leave, I returned from my morning run to find a black SUV parked across from my cabin. It looked out of place, a sleek black SUV parked across from my cabin, far too polished for the dusty back roads and rusted pickups typical of this area. I tried to ignore it, chalk it up to coincidence. But when I drove into town later, there it was again, hanging back in my rearview mirror. Always at the same distance. Always just far enough to make it deniable. I fell back on old habits, counter-surveillance drills burned into my brain from deployments. Quick turns, doubling back, changing speeds unexpectedly. The SUV followed, smoothly, like it had rehearsed. The driver was good, subtle enough that someone untrained might miss it. But I knew what I was seeing. At a stoplight, the car pulled up behind me just close enough that I caught a glimpse through the windshield. It was my father. A cold weight settled in my gut. This wasn't a concerned father checking in on his estranged son. This was surveillance. That evening, I found Trevor at the Anchor, the same dive bar we used to sneak into as teenagers when we thought we were being clever. He was hunched over a glass of something amber-colored, his body slumped like a man carrying more than just a bad day. He'd gained weight, lost confidence. The Trevor I remembered, loud, brash, unbreakable, had faded into someone tired and hollowed out. "Buy you a drink, stranger?" I asked, sliding onto the stool beside him. He flinched slightly, then turned to me with a crooked smile that didn't touch his eyes. Well, look what the war sent back. 3 drinks later, the cracks in his mask started to widen. He called me Marty again, my childhood nickname, his voice thick with booze and regret. "You were smart to leave. Marty should have gone with you." "What's happening with the business, Trevor?" He let out a bitter laugh. "Business? It's all smoke and mirrors now." He leaned in close, voice low and breath heavy with whiskey. "Dad overextended, bid on contracts we couldn't possibly fulfill. Then I made some bad calls. Investments. Big ones. They tanked. So the company's in trouble." He stared into his glass like it might tell him something he didn't want to know. "Financial, legal, ethical. Take your pick." He drained the last of his drink. "Dad found a way to save it, though. Always does." "What way?" Trevor's eyes met mine. They were bloodshot and haunted. "You don't want to know, Marty. Trust me." He stood unsteadily, grabbing his coat. "I should go. Dad tracks the mileage on my car now." The next morning, I got a text from an unknown number. "Diner on Route 9. 11 a.m. Come alone. Mom." The Route 9 diner was out past the edge of town, about 30 minutes by car. Far enough that my mother wouldn't risk running into anyone she knew. I arrived early, choosing a booth with a clear view of both entrances and the parking lot. She walked in exactly at 11 o'clock. Impeccably dressed, as always, camel coat, pearl earrings, everything in place. But beneath it all, the strain showed. Faint lines around her mouth. The nervous flutter of her hands as she slipped off her gloves. "Martin," she said, voice catching in her throat. You look strong. Military training will do that," I said evenly. She winced, like even now my career choice was still a sore spot. "Why all the secrecy, Mom? And why is Dad following me around town?" "He doesn't know I'm here," she said quickly, glancing toward the door like she expected him to burst in. "He monitors my phone, the GPS in my car. I had to tell him I was getting my hair done in Portsmouth just to come." She reached across the table, stopping just shy of touching my hand. "You need to leave, Martin. Go back to your base. Forget about this Christmas visit." "Why? What's going on?" She hesitated, her voice trembling. "Your father, he blames you. For everything. He's not rational anymore. When he found out you were coming home, he told me not to see you." I stared at her. "After he learned I already had leave approved?" She faltered. She stopped herself. "It doesn't matter," she whispered. "What matters is that you're not safe here. None of us are," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Not with you here, stirring everything up." "I'm not stirring anything," I replied. "I just came home for Christmas." "Please, Martin." Her eyes welled up with tears. "He blames you for everything, the business problems, Trevor's mistakes, Jenna dropping out. He says, if you had joined the company like you were supposed to, none of this would have happened." It was irrational, but it was classic Raymond Sanders. External blame for internal failures. "I need to understand what's happening," I said, steady, insistent. "No, you need to leave." She stood abruptly. Her gloved hand trembled as she picked up her purse. I've done what I could. Warned you. The rest is up to you. And just like that, she was gone. I sat for a long time in that booth, watching the parking lot empty out, my coffee growing cold. My military training had taught me to assess threats, gather intel, develop strategic responses. This time, the battlefield was my own family. Back at the cabin, I started digging. Sanders Construction's public records showed a hard pivot 5 years ago away from local projects and into exclusive government contracts, mostly military infrastructure. Contract values had tripled, then quadrupled. Local news archives showed a trail of complaints from competing firms, irregular bidding, conflicts of interest, all ultimately dismissed without consequence. Then I found it. A press release proudly touting Sanders Construction's unique qualification status, citing veteran leadership with active high-level military security clearance. Veteran leadership? My stomach dropped. There were no veterans in Sanders Construction. Unless. A chill worked its way up my spine. My rising rank. The clearance I'd earned during my second tour. My father's indifference toward my service. Not disinterest, no. He hadn't ignored my military career. He'd been using it. That night, on my way back from the town library where I'd been buried in records, I found a note under my windshield wiper. Soldiers should know when to retreat. The handwriting was unmistakable. My father's. I called Captain Walker, using the secure military line, not my personal cell. Sir, I began, I need to ask you something. Officially, has anyone ever requested verification of my security clearance or service record for civilian contracting? There was a pause. A long one. There have been inquiries, yes. Standard checks for family businesses bidding on military contracts if a relative's in service. Why do you ask? I need to know. I said carefully, if any documentation was ever processed using my signature, authorizing Sanders Construction to use my credentials. Another pause, this one longer, heavier. Sanders, are you saying you never signed such an authorization? Never, sir. I'll look into it immediately. In the meantime, document everything and watch your back. That night, I barely slept, mind racing, puzzle pieces swirling. My father's desperation to save his failing company. My conveniently timed military credentials. The sudden flood of government contracts requiring clearance. Now, whispers of federal investigations into irregular bidding. He hadn't just used me. He was setting me up. I woke on the 7th day of my leave to my phone buzzing nonstop. 20 missed calls lit up the screen. 5 from my mother. 7 from Jenna. 3 from Trevor. 4 from Erica. And 1 from Harrison Reynolds, my father's lawyer. His oldest friend. I played the voicemails in order. They started calm enough, then escalated into panic. Martin, it's Mom. Call me as soon as you get this. Martin, seriously, pick up. It's Jenna. Marty, it's Trevor, Dad's in the hospital. Had a heart attack last night. It's bad. Call me. Martin, it's your grandmother. Whatever you're thinking, put it aside. Your father needs you. The last voicemail made my blood run cold. Mr. Sanders, this is Harrison Reynolds. I represent your family's legal interests. We need to discuss the matter of certain signatures before the situation escalates further. Please call my office immediately. I stared at the voicemail, heart pounding. Dressed in under a minute, I was already in the truck and headed for Portland General. My thoughts raced as the highway stretched ahead. Was this another move in my father's game? A trap to lure me into the open, maybe where federal investigators would be waiting. Or had he really cracked under the pressure, his entire scheme unraveling with him at the center? The hospital waiting room was a familiar mix of beige walls, fluorescent lighting, and quiet dread, but this time, it was the setting for Sanders' family dysfunction. My mother sat in a stiff corner chair, posture flawless, makeup untouched, the portrait of composed denial. Jenna paced near the entrance, biting her nails, a habit Dad had berated since we were kids. Trevor stood apart by the window, slouched and hollow-eyed, looking like he hadn't slept in days. They all froze when I walked in. How is he? I asked, not directing it to anyone in particular. Stable, Jenna replied finally. Triple bypass scheduled for tomorrow. Then her tone changed, sharp and accusatory. What did you do, Martin? I blinked. Excuse me. Dad was fine until you came back and started stirring things up, she hissed. He got your text and collapsed 20 minutes later. I didn't text Dad. Don't lie. Her voice cracked, a mix of anger and desperation. He showed it to us. Said you were threatening to go to the authorities. After everything he's done for you. I let the cold truth settle between us. I didn't send that text, I said calmly. And Dad hasn't done a thing for me in 8 years unless you count forging my signature and potentially committing federal fraud using my military clearance. The room went still. My mother's color drained. Trevor looked away. You don't know what you're talking about, he muttered, but he didn't sound convinced. Don't I? I stepped forward, keeping my voice level. Sanders Construction suddenly pivoting to military contracts requiring clearance. Dad following me around town. A call from the family lawyer about certain signatures. I looked each of them in the eye. What did he do? What did you let him do? Mr. Sanders? Harrison Reynolds stood at the doorway, looking older than I remembered, but just as polished, just as blank. A word, please. I followed him down the corridor, away from the silent room and its broken loyalties. He didn't speak until we were clear of the waiting area. Your father suffered a serious cardiac event last night, he began. After allegedly receiving a threatening text from me that I never sent, I finished for him. He studied me, arms folded. I've known your father 30 years. He's a proud, difficult man, but he loves his family. I looked him dead in the eye. Is that why he forged my signature to fraudulently secure government contracts? Reynolds didn't deny it. Instead, he let out a long, tired sigh. The situation is complicated. Then simplify it. He adjusted his cufflinks, then spoke. Your father's company was failing. The recession hit hard. An opportunity arose: military infrastructure contracts, but those required someone with active security clearance on the executive board. I felt the pieces locking into place. And my estranged son, conveniently in active service, was the perfect solution. He thought you'd never find out, Reynolds admitted. The clearance was just to secure the contracts. The actual construction work was legitimate. Except for the part where he committed fraud, I said flatly. Reynolds looked away for a moment. Yes. Well, that's where things became complicated. When federal auditors began sniffing around, your father needed a contingency. He was going to blame me, I said, already knowing the answer. Reynolds didn't argue. That's why he didn't want me coming home, I said quietly. He needed time. Time to build a paper trail showing I was the one who authorized everything. Raymond made some poor choices under extreme pressure, Reynolds said carefully. Poor choices. I stared at him. He committed fraud using my military credentials while I was deployed overseas. Then he planned to let me take the fall for it. Those aren't poor choices, they're crimes. Before Reynolds could answer, a voice called out behind us, sharp with urgency. Martin. My grandmother Erica came toward us, moving quicker than I'd seen her move since I came home. She clutched a folder tightly in both hands. I need to show you something, she said, thrusting the folder into my arms. I opened it and froze. Inside were documents, dozens of them with my signature. Or rather, forgeries. Security clearance authorization forms. Contract applications. Military vendor registrations. All dated during deployments, times I was halfway across the world, when I couldn't have signed a thing. I always suspected Raymond was hiding something, Erica said. After our talk, I decided to do some investigating of my own. Reynolds looked pale. Erica, you broke into Raymond's safe? She raised her chin. I built that house, Harrison. I know all its secrets. Then she turned to me. I've already made copies. These are the originals. A sudden commotion interrupted us, voices raised, footsteps rushing. Down the hall, I heard my mother's cry. Nurses and doctors streamed past us toward my father's room. He's having another episode. Jenna called, her face white as chalk. For a second, I stood frozen. Despite everything, this was still my father. The man who taught me to ride a bike, who hoisted me on his shoulders at 4th of July parades, who once sat at the foot of my bed to read me stories after nightmares. But then I remembered that text message, don't bother coming home. And my reply, fine. It hadn't just been acceptance. It had been a declaration. A line drawn in sand that would never wash away. I need to make some calls, I told Reynolds. Starting with my legal counsel. The military doesn't waste time when one of their own is under threat. That evening, I sat in a secure conference room at the Portland Federal Building, across from 2 attorneys from the Judge Advocate General's Corps. Major Lisa Hernandez took the lead. They listened without interrupting as I laid out the timeline, the forged documents Erica had uncovered, the irregular bidding patterns, the fake text message. I gave them everything, my deployment records, the timing of the contracts, every shred of evidence I had gathered. When I finished, Hernandez folded her hands and said, this is a clear case of identity theft, fraud, and potentially espionage, depending on whether sensitive information was compromised. I nodded slowly. What happens now? We coordinate with federal investigators already looking into the irregularities, she replied. Your father and anyone else involved will face questioning. She softened slightly, her voice lower. I understand this is your family. That makes it harder. I swallowed hard. My family made their choices, I said. But my voice cracked more than I wanted. Outside the federal building, Ronan was waiting, leaning casually against his truck like it was just another Thursday. Thought you might need a friendly face, he said. Rachel told me where you were. The words broke something in me. All day I'd kept my composure, through hospital lies and legal strategy. But now, standing in the quiet dusk, I let myself feel it. The weight. The betrayal. Ronan didn't try to fix it. He didn't offer empty words. He just drove me back to the cabin, made a mug of hot chocolate laced with whiskey, and listened. The worst part, I told him finally, is they're still acting like I'm the one who betrayed them. Like discovering their lies is worse than the lies themselves. He gave a tired nod. People get weird when their secrets come to light. They blamed the revealer instead of facing what was revealed. In the days that followed, everything moved fast. Federal agents questioned me multiple times. Military security officers audited every contract associated with my credentials. My father stabilized enough for his triple bypass surgery. It was successful, but he remained in the ICU, tethered to machines, watched around the clock. I stayed away from the hospital. My focus was elsewhere on clearing my name, gathering evidence, and untangling myself from the legal and moral wreckage of my father's scheme. On the fourth day after everything broke open, Trevor showed up at the cabin. He looked terrible. Unshaven, bloodshot eyes, clothes wrinkled like he hadn't changed in days. He didn't knock, just opened the door and stood there, like gravity barely held him up. They froze all the company accounts, he said without preamble, voice hoarse. Interviewed me for 6 hours yesterday. Did you know? I asked. About Dad using my credentials. He didn't answer at first, just stared past me at the wood-burning stove, lips pressed tight. I suspected, he admitted finally. Didn't want to know for sure. And you were okay with that? With him setting me up to take the fall. His shoulders hunched, and he ran a hand through greasy hair. I didn't know that part. Not until it all went to hell. He looked like a little boy in that moment, lost, ashamed. I'm sorry, he said. I should have stood up to him years ago. We all should have. It wasn't enough. Not after what nearly happened. But it was something. A start. Jenna came next, showing up the following day. She looked just as worn out as Trevor, but angrier, like rage was the only thing keeping her upright. They're saying Dad could go to prison, she snapped. Is that what you want? What I want is irrelevant, I said, keeping my voice even. Dad committed fraud. Multiple federal crimes. He was trying to save the business. Save all of us. By sacrificing me, I said. The son he already threw away. That's not fair. Her voice cracked. You left us. I joined the army. I didn't abandon my family. Dad is the one who cut me off because I wouldn't follow his grand plan. That shut her up for a moment. The fire behind her eyes dimmed. He always had to control everything. Everyone, she murmured. And you all let him. What choice did we have? You had the same choice I did, I said. To live your own life. I stepped aside and gestured toward the kitchen table. Sit. She did, hesitantly. I poured 2 mugs of coffee, slid one across to her. Why did you really leave your PhD program, Jenna? She flinched, then stared down into her mug. Her eyes brimmed with tears. I was having panic attacks. Couldn't sleep. The pressure from Dad to be perfect, to be the academic success since you were the disappointment. She wiped her eyes, angrily. I wanted to be a kindergarten teacher. Dad said no Sanders would waste their potential like that. She didn't need to say more. I understood the rest. Slowly, painfully, the full picture was coming together of a man imploding for years, trying to control everything as his business crumbled and his children pulled away. Trevor's reckless investments had accelerated the company's downfall. My father, desperate, had found an opening in my military service, a way to secure military contracts through my security clearance. When auditors started asking questions, he prepared to throw me under the bus, portraying me as a resentful son trying to sabotage the family from afar. My unplanned Christmas return had blown a hole in the narrative. A week after the surgery, my mother came to see me. She looked smaller than I remembered, shoulders hunched, voice subdued. Without my father's commanding presence beside her, she seemed diminished. He's asking for you, she said. The doctors say his recovery depends on reducing stress. So I'm supposed to pretend everything's fine. I asked, that he didn't try to frame me for his crimes. I'm asking you to listen, she said softly, to what he has to say. She twisted her wedding ring nervously. I'm not defending what he did. It was wrong. Terribly wrong. Did you know? She didn't answer right away. Couldn't meet my eyes. I suspected something wasn't right with the new contracts, she said finally. Raymond became secretive, working late, locking his office. But I never imagined he would use your credentials. Her voice cracked. I should have protected you better. All these years. Her words weren't enough to erase the damage. But they chipped at the wall. A crack in the Sanders family facade. I'll think about seeing him, I said. It was the best I could offer. Erica proved to be my strongest ally. She didn't try to explain things away or minimize what had happened. Instead, she used her role as family matriarch to bring what little remained of us together. She organized a small gathering at her cottage. Rachel, Ronan, a few of my old teachers and friends, people who had always believed in me, gathered quietly at Erica's cottage. There was no formal invitation, just a shared understanding that something had shifted, that maybe the truth could be met with dignity rather than disgrace. As we prepared food together, Erica worked beside me in the kitchen, chopping onions with mechanical precision. The Sanders have always cared too much about appearances, she said. Raymond, worst of all. But real family isn't about maintaining perfect images. It's about loving each other through the imperfect reality. Her words stuck with me, lodged deeper than I expected. A few days later, I got a call from Captain Walker. "Martin," he said, his tone formal but carrying a weight of personal respect. "I'm calling to inform you your record has been fully cleared of any suspicion. The investigation found no wrongdoing on your part." A quiet breath escaped me. "Thank you, sir. You showed more integrity in exposing this situation than most people would have," he said. "It couldn't have been easy. I just did what any soldier would do, sir." "No," he replied, his voice softening. "You did what a person of character does even when it cost you personally. That's rarer than you think." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just said, "Understood." With Erica's carefully compiled evidence and my testimony, the federal investigation moved quickly. The scope of wrongdoing grew each day. Prosecutors built a strong case against my father, while Harrison Reynolds scrambled behind the scenes negotiating, deflecting, trying to limit the damage. After 2 weeks of silence, I agreed to see my father. He was home by then, recovering in the same master bedroom that had once seemed like a fortress when I was a boy. Now it looked smaller. He looked smaller too, propped up on pillows, machines humming quietly beside him. "Martin," he said when I stepped through the doorway. His voice was thin, strained. Without thinking, I straightened. Years of training, standing at attention in the presence of authority. "Sir," I said coldly. He winced. "Don't call me that. I'm your father." "Are you?" I asked, stepping further into the room. "You haven't acted like it in 8 years. I deserve that." Silence. Awkward. Heavy. "Why?" I asked finally. "Why use my credentials? Why risk everything, me included?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes wandered to the edge of the blanket, to the window, to anywhere but my face. "The business was failing," he said at last. "Everything I'd built, everything I wanted to leave to you kids, it was crumbling. I was desperate. So desperate you'd let me take the fall." He closed his eyes, took a ragged breath. "I never intended." He stopped himself. "No, that's not true. I did intend it. At the end, when everything was crashing down, yes, I planned to let you take the blame." His eyes met mine, finally, filled with something I couldn't name. "I've spent my life believing I was building something important, something that mattered. When it started to fail, I couldn't accept it. That doesn't excuse what you did." "No," he said quietly. "It doesn't." To my surprise, tears welled in his eyes. "I was always proud of you, you know," he whispered. "Your courage, your independence. I just didn't know how to show it. Couldn't admit I was wrong to push you away." I stared at him, stunned. This version of my father, frail, apologetic, human, I'd never met before. "That doesn't excuse what you did," I said again, but my voice was softer this time. "No," he agreed. "It doesn't. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was something. A beginning." 3 weeks after his heart attack, Sanders Construction officially entered federal receivership. The investigation had uncovered far more than the misuse of my credentials. There were tax violations, bribery of local officials, falsified inspection reports, layer after layer of corruption. Overwhelmed by the evidence, my father accepted a plea deal. He admitted his guilt in exchange for a reduced sentence. Given his medical condition, it would likely be house arrest, but the fines alone would almost bankrupt the family. My mother, shell-shocked by the speed at which her carefully curated life had come apart, began seeing a therapist. Gradually, she started reclaiming parts of herself that had been subsumed by my father's domineering personality. My mother resumed teaching part-time at the local community college, rediscovering a passion for education she'd shelved decades ago for the sake of appearances and my father's ambitions. Over one of our cautious, tentative coffee meetings, she stirred her tea slowly before speaking. "I enabled him," she admitted, eyes downcast. "For years, I chose peace over truth, stability over integrity." I didn't interrupt, just let the silence hold. "I won't make that mistake again," she added, firmer this time. And for the first time, I believed her. Jenna, now free from Dad's towering expectations, re-enrolled in school not for a PhD in psychology like before, but for a master's in early childhood education. Something she'd once dreamed of, but had abandoned under the weight of being the promising one. The panic attacks that used to keep her up at night had started to fade. "I spent so many years trying to be who Dad wanted," she told me one night, her voice quieter than usual. "I barely know who I actually am." "You'll figure it out," I told her. "It took me joining the army and getting shot at to find myself." She laughed, then an honest, full laugh I hadn't heard from her in years. "Maybe I'll skip that part of the journey." I smiled. Fair enough. Trevor, though, had the hardest road ahead. Groomed from birth to be the heir to Sanders' construction, his whole identity was tied to Dad's empire. With the company being dismantled and Dad disgraced, Trevor drifted like a man without gravity. I don't know how to be anything except Raymond Sanders' son and heir, he confessed one evening when he showed up at my door with a six-pack and that haunted look in his eyes. Then become someone else, I said simply. Someone better. He didn't respond, just stared out across the snow-laced trees, but something in his jaw tightened like maybe, just maybe, he would try. Christmas was different that year. Erica hosted it at her small cottage, a far cry from the grand, showy Sanders holidays we'd grown up with. But it felt real. Warmer. My mother brought her famous cinnamon rolls, the ones she used to make when we were kids back before Dad insisted on catered brunches. Jenna decorated the tiny tree with handmade ornaments, carefully looping each ribbon like she was hanging pieces of herself back on the branches. Trevor, making a visible effort, arrived with armloads of firewood and a variety of local craft beers no one asked for, but everyone appreciated. Dad stayed home, still too weak to attend. Not that anyone said it, but we all knew he wasn't entirely welcome yet. His absence hung over the gathering like a shadow, but it didn't consume us. Ronan came too. He fit in easier than I expected, cracking dry jokes that helped smooth over the silences. Later, as we washed dishes together, shoulder to shoulder at Erica's sink, he leaned over and whispered, "Strangest Christmas I've ever had." I snorted. "You and me both." He smiled. "Also maybe the best. The military had granted me extended leave to handle the legal fallout and family collapse. Captain Walker checked in regularly. "Take the time you need, Sanders," he told me over the phone. "Your unit will be there when you're ready to return." As the Maine winter deepened, I found myself thinking more about what came next. 2 years remained in my current enlistment, but what after that? Options stretched out in front of me like snow-covered roads, continuing my military career, returning to civilian life, maybe even coming back to this town for good. "I'm thinking of starting a veterans support program here," I told Ronan one night as we walked along the shoreline, boots crunching in the icy sand. "Something to help soldiers transition back to civilian life after deployment. After trauma." He squeezed my gloved hand. "Sounds like someone found his calling." The hardest conversations, though, were with my father. As his physical health slowly improved, we began carefully scheduled visits structured by boundaries and monitored by unspoken tension. During one of those meetings, he looked at me with that hollowed-out version of the authority he once wielded and said, "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it." I sat across from him, elbows on knees, meeting his eyes without blinking. "Forgiveness isn't about deserving," I said, echoing something a chaplain once told me after a mission gone sideways. "It's about choosing to let go of the burden of anger. Doesn't mean forgetting. Doesn't mean excusing." He nodded slowly. "When did my son get so wise?" "Somewhere between basic training and pulling wounded civilians from a burning building," I said. He chuckled weakly. "Should have known it would take a war." We didn't hug, didn't cry, but something shifted in that moment. An acknowledgement of truth. An unraveling of the roles we'd both been forced into. Slowly, painfully, we began rebuilding. Not the old relationship, rigid, conditional, scripted, but something new. Something grounded in difficult truths and cautious hope. Erica watched our family's slow, painful transformation with a quiet satisfaction. One evening, we sat together on her porch, mugs of coffee warming our hands as snow fell gently on the dormant garden. "Family isn't just what you're born into," she said, her voice soft but sure. "It's what you create through love and truth and forgiveness." I looked at her. "Even when it's messy." She smiled, eyes crinkling. "Especially when it's messy, dear. Perfect families exist only in photographs and Christmas cards." As spring crept back across Maine and my leave neared its end, I found myself reflecting more often on the strange, winding journey that had started with a single, bitter exchange. When my father had texted me, "Don't bother coming home," and I'd answered with one word, "Fine," neither of us could have imagined what would come next. That rejection, cruel and cutting in the moment, had ultimately freed me. Freed me to find my voice, my strength, my boundaries. Fine wasn't surrender. It was the first step in standing my ground, in refusing to be manipulated by guilt, obligation, or legacy any longer. If I could write a letter to that younger version of myself, that uncertain kid who joined the army just to get out from under his father's expectations, I know exactly what I'd say. The rejection that breaks your heart today will lead you to the strength that defines your tomorrow. The family you fight so hard to please isn't the only family you'll have. Sometimes the hardest roads lead to the truest destinations. Because I found peace not in earning my father's approval, but in no longer needing it. And I found family not just in blood, but in the people who stood beside me through the fire. Ronan, Erica, Rachel, my brothers and sisters in uniform. The night before I was scheduled to return to base, I sat alone at the kitchen table in the cabin that had become my sanctuary these last few chaotic months. I opened my journal, needing to leave something behind in ink. I wrote, "Sometimes rejection is direction. Sometimes fine is the most powerful word you can say. And sometimes the family you fight hardest to be part of isn't the family you actually need." I had come home seeking reconciliation and found revelation instead. The road ahead was still uncertain. Legal proceedings were ongoing. Family relationships remained fragile. My father's health hung in the balance. But for the first time in years, I felt at peace with who I was and where I belonged. 2 months later, I returned to Maine, not in uniform, not for leave, and not for family. I came back as a witness. My father's case had advanced to the federal level. The evidence was too damning to ignore: forged signatures, backdated authorizations, military clearance fraud. I had provided my own testimony, with documents and timestamps to back it up. It wasn't revenge. It was necessary. He took a plea deal. Considering his health and the fact that he was a first-time offender, he received 2 years probation, a heavy fine, and a permanent ban from bidding on any federal or state projects. The empire he built was gone. What remained of Sanders' construction was sold off to cover debts and legal costs. He stayed out of prison, but the legacy he obsessed over had turned to ash. I saw my father. His face was gaunt, and the harsh courtroom lighting made him look smaller than I remembered. As I passed him on my way out, he wouldn't meet my eyes. But that didn't matter. I wasn't there to fix him anymore. I moved into a small rental outside Augusta a week later, using the last of my leave to lay the groundwork for something new, a nonprofit veteran transition program, something I'd thought about since my second tour. We called it Second Line, a nod to both the military and the quiet strength that comes after the front lines. The mission was simple: help vets find footing when they come home, whether that meant jobs, education, or just someone to talk to who got it. We partnered with contractors, tech firms, even a few local unions. And I made sure our security clearance stayed where it belonged: earned, not stolen. Jenna started volunteering with us on weekends, tutoring vets who wanted to finish college. Trevor sent the occasional donation, always unsigned. Our mother visited once, bringing Erica's famous blueberry muffins, and stayed longer than she meant to. I stood outside the Second Line office one night, watching the veterans file out after group therapy, joking, elbowing each other, some limping, some carrying invisible wounds. This was the legacy I was proud of. Not one built on my father's lies, but on truth, on resilience, on choosing something better when I finally had the chance. And as I locked up, I found myself thinking again of that word I'd once used to end a conversation with my father. Fine. It wasn't resignation then, and it sure as hell wasn't now. It was the beginning of everything I'd finally built, on my own terms. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.